ban on violent video games is an idea that has been thrown around since around the early 1990s, as you said. However, as there is evidence for both sides, there are no convincing studies that create a direct link between violent FPS video games and violent acts in the United States. For example, the Christian Science Monitor published an article just this week stating that violent video games do not necessarily increase the likelihood that he or she will engage in real violence. This indicates the split state of the debate. If there was proof these violent video games led to real violence, then I'm sure the idea of banning such games would be inadequate action. However, I think it is more likely that video games glorifying gun violence are just another psychological scapegoat that people try to use to explain a rising trend of violence. If there was indeed a proven link between media glorifying violence and violent action, a ban of video games would probably not solve the problem. If kids couldn't play violent video games, they would still be exposed to violent movies and other forms of media. If there seems to be evidence in favor of violent video games having an effect on someone that leads them to commit some sort of atrocity, such as a school shooting, uh, and can we really convince ourselves that this is not simply the way it manifested in the times? What I mean by that is that people with a predisposition to this sort of violent behavior may have developed this way anyway and still committed the violent acts, and they just happen to play video games because a lot of people do. I feel it is almost a cop-out to hide behind statistics that have no real correlation between violent video games and real violence. Besides, violent video games are what consumers want. If people didn't want to play violent games, then software companies wouldn't produce them. If violent video games are banned, what else will follow? Also, as it stands, the games you described are already only legally sold to those 17 or older, as they have mature ratings. Would raising the age a year really have any effect at all? The point of the ratings is to make sure youth are not considered ready will not be exposed to such violent content. It is the parents' responsibility to make sure that they don't play these games if they think that they are having an impact on the child's development, not the government's. This would be the government inserting itself into the decision-making process that happens between parents and children. This would also imply that the government can do a better job raising children than their parents can. This is an objection that on its own probably makes a ban unfavorable to many people, and I doubt it would pass.